You may be seated. The court is now back in session. We would like to give the floor to the prosecution regarding the submission of additional documents related to the population movement in the first phase. You may proceed.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Good afternoon, Mr. President, Your Honours. What I suggest for this afternoon is as follows. I think all of the parties have received a notification before this hearing of the fact that we were going to be talking about documents that were submitted by the co-prosecutors in 3 annexes. If each of the parties do have table E223/2/1.2, which is the main table that concerns the evacuation of Phnom Penh, and 2 other tables, namely E223/2/2.2 concerning the second forced transfer, and E223/2/1.3. Excuse me, says the Speaker, I got that wrong. E223/2/1.3 concerning second transfer, and /2/1.4 concerning Twelpo Chray. If everybody has those tables in front of them, then what I would suggest, to save a lot of time, Mr. President, would be not to go through each reference of each of the documents one by one, but rather that the defence merely point out if they do have objections, and then we will strive to respond to them. But I don't think it's necessary to read out each reference of each of the 94 documents contained in those annexes, since everybody has them in front of them. Thank you, Mr. President.
President, thank you. Since there is a clear presentation by the prosecution regarding the documents they intended to put before the chamber, and all the documents attached in the annex, and all parties have access to the annex with the particular document number as indicated by the prosecutor, that is E223/2/1.2. The second one is E223/2/1.3, and the third one is E223/2/1.4. The documents are available and accessible to all the parties. The floor is now given to the defense teams to make their remark or to express their objection to any of the documents. In regards to the list of all the documents listed in the three annexes, we start from Noon Chia's defense, if you have any remark to make.
Thank you, Mr. President. Just to be sure that we are talking about the same annex, because I couldn't quite find the number that was given by the prosecution. Is that the 14-page document consisting of 86, to be precise, 86 documents? That's the Annex 2A, and then Annex 2B, and Annex 2C. Those are the ones. Assuming that I'm correct, at this point we don't have any objections to make, since we clearly have not been able to discuss these documents on the content with our client. So we have received no instructions as these documents are concerned, so at this stage we cannot make any informed or intelligence observations on these specific documents. So we would like to accept your invitation to be allowed to give any written submissions in the case that we have them, once we have been able to discuss them with our client.
President, I would like to give the floor now to Judge Cartwright. You may proceed.
Thank you, President. Yes, the Chamber acknowledges that it has indicated in respect of Nguyen Chia and Kyo Sampan defences that they will have an opportunity at a later stage to comment on these documents, and the Chamber will advise in due course as to the method and timing by which those comments are to be received. Thank you.
President, what about the other two defense teams? Do you have any observation to make regarding the documents outlined by the prosecution?
Thank you, Mr. President, and good afternoon, Your Honors, and good afternoon to everyone in and around the courtroom. I have, as far as the first annex, 65 pages that I could read into the record on my comments. For the second one, I have 2, and then for the third one, I have 3 pages. These are the written submissions that we prepared, that we were planning on filing, so that there's no misunderstanding that somehow we did not show up prepared, which is why I thought I would take this opportunity not to read into the record 65 pages, but rather to just cover what hasn't been covered this morning, because some of the topics or some of the types of documents in these 3 annexes cover not only the categories of documents that I discussed this morning, but I would say there's 2 additional types of documents that I can speak of very quickly in general terms. The prosecution can object to whatever, to this approach, but be that as it may, it would seem that in addition to what I've said earlier, as far as why certain categories of documents should not be admitted, we have photographs. So this morning we had videos, this afternoon these have photographs. We would object to any photograph coming in unless, one, either the photographer comes in or there is some independent indicia of reliability that gives context as to how the photograph was generated, at what period, what it purports to be, etc. We do have on the witness list one photojournalist who is expected to testify. I understand that some of his photographs will be shown to him. Obviously, at that point in time, he can provide information. Another example is where, for instance, a journalist would come in where they wrote an article but used photographs that were actually generated by someone else. Certainly, we have no objections to the commentary as far as what the photograph purports to be, since it was attached to an article written by journalists. Suffice it to say, these sorts of documents should not come in unless either the photographer comes in or there's some independent indicia through other evidence, testimonial evidence, that would shed light on the content and context of the photograph. The other type of documents that were not included in my morning's presentation are those that were generated or those that are part of the Tramcock district records. And you may recall that when Mr. Yuk Chang came and testified, he had indicated that the original documents had been lost, and that Ben Kiernan had told the OCIJ that he was given the original ones, made photocopies, and somehow the original ones have disappeared or have been misplaced. Obviously, Mr. Yuk Chang is not in a position to provide evidence or was not in a position, I should say, to provide evidence concerning the chain of custody, and therefore, and since the documents have been lost, we would object to any of these documents coming in unless some sort of, again, independent indicia of reliability and authenticity can be shown. Barring that, I incorporate all my comments that I made this morning as to other types of documents that are referenced in these annexes, such as letters, international communications, media articles, funk-grunk publications, OCIJ investigative reports or letters. And so that's the end of my presentation, Your Honors. And as I've indicated, we do have prepared written answers to every single document. That way, you can sift through our submissions when we file them. And we have filed submissions of this sort in the past, and there have been no objections from the prosecution, and certainly the trial chamber has not advised us or ordered us not to do so. Thank you.
President, thank you. We would like now to give the floor to the defense team for Q-Support if you have any observation to make.
Thank you, Mr. President. Very briefly, once again, in the light of your decision of the 3rd of December 2012, there are certain objections that we will not level, even if, generally speaking, we might have done so. We do have one objection on the documents that are entitled Trump Kuk District Record by the co-prosecutors, and more specifically on the documents that are listed after number 40. The ones that follow number 40 in Annex 2A, E223/2. And basically we're asking questions about the admissibility and the reliability of these documents, specifically those where there is not an identifiable author. In number 40, 41, 43, 44, 45, and I won't bore you by listing them all, but all of those documents that do not have an identifiable author should not, in our view, be used for probative value. And one small point that was brought up this morning by my colleague on the subject of the rogatory letter reports, to the extent that these refer to written statements, then I think again there is a question about admissibility there that should be discussed jointly with the discussion that we should have in April with the allied discussion on written statements. In fact, I'm referring to number 39 on the list, D 277/9. Thank you.
President, thank you. The prosecution, would you like to make any response to the objection raised by the defense team?
Oui, merci, Monsieur.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. This morning, we heard a number of objections raised by counsel for Ieng Sary, and we think they shouldn't be repeated this afternoon. That will enable me to gain time so that I can focus exclusively on categories that were specifically identified by the two defense teams, while bearing in mind what I said this morning regarding other categories of information, international media, articles. I recall your jurisprudence that we do not need to have those authors appear before us in order for the documents to be admitted in evidence. The 4 photographs are in different annexes. Some have to do with the first forced transfers. It was taken by TCW 555, and it is D366/7.1.416. D366/7.1.7.16. And another photograph is from TCW 470. The reference is D313/1.2.238. These photographs, from what we know, were taken at the time of the evacuation of Phnom Penh around the 17th of April, 1975. They are relevant because they are contemporaneous documents of the DK era. They show a crowd welcoming Khmer Rouge combatants, including one Khmer Rouge soldier armed. Then they also show Khmer Rouge around the Olympic Stadium at the time of the evacuation. These documents are important, and they will enable the judges and the parties to visualize the events that were contemporaneous with the evacuation of Phnom Penh. And then TCW 555 will, in the course of his or her testimony, be confronted with such photographs. And again, the admissibility of these photographs is not necessarily related, or it does not necessarily call for the appearance of those who took those photographs. There's another photograph, DC, document D223/1.4. It has to do with the Tupusre execution site, and it is Sector 7 of the Northwest Zone in Persat Province. These two photographs have the following references: D313/1.2.104. and D313/1.2/106. And these two photographs were taken by SICAM in 1977, at a time when the Documentation Center of Cambodia was put in place. On DC, we also have document IS 18.78. This report, IS 18.78, mentions the name of a person identified on your list as TCW 699. And that person is on the first photograph. The first of the two photographs I mentioned a while ago. That person was also questioned by OCIJ investigators in document D125/90. /70, I beg your pardon. These are documents that were forwarded by DCCAM, and they are related to the testimony of the director of that center before this chamber. Now, regarding the archives of Tramkak district, there is one thing we should not overlook, and it is that last year, that was in March 2012, we had already discussed a number of other documents from the same archives from the Tramkak district. There were 57 in number. And we had a lengthy debate on the relevance and reliability of those documents at the time. It should be noted that the Chamber ruled that all the 57 documents were admissible, unless I am mistaken, in its decision of the 3rd of December 2012, E185/1. I will not revisit all the arguments we raised last year. However, I will touch on some of them because those 49 documents are part of the same batch of documents, so there is no distinction between different documents. So we don't think the Chamber should change its position, but I'll insist on some of the specific aspects of some of those 49 documents regarding the forced population transfers, particularly the transfer from Phnom Penh. Now, the 49 documents selected here are relevant if you look at the titles. First of all, with regard to the communication system used by local authorities in District 105. Secondly, regarding the administrative structure of District 105. And lastly, regarding the policies of the Communist Party of Cambodia regarding re-education of bad elements and the elimination of enemies, both within the party and outside the party. Then we have the policy, which entails taking specific measures against specific groups, former senior officers of the Khmer Republic, that is the Long Nol military officers and their families, as well as a series of people belonging to the new people, hence the link with the forced transfers of people from urban areas to rural areas, particularly from Phnom Penh to the southwest zone. Now, what do we find in the 49 documents? They are essentially reports drawn up by the different communes and which were sent to District 105. We also have reports of the Kringkacheng Security Center, also sent to District 105. We also have instructions that were issued by the senior echelons in the districts to lower sectors, communes, and security centers. As a general rule, these reports essentially consist of lists of persons drawn up by the communes and which on each occasion specify that one person or the other was a soldier or a civil servant in the Lon Nol regime or belonged to the new people. Another type of document among the 49 documents is reports, biographies or confessions from the Kringkacheng Security District Center. These reports have to do with detainees who were specifically identified as members of the new people or as former soldiers of the Khmer Republic or officials of the Khmer Republic. Then we also have mention made of prisoners from France, that is S18.32 of the 25th of April 1977. This shows that particular attention in that district with regard to security matters was paid to new people who were evacuated from Phnom Penh, as well as officers, non-commissioned officers, and civil servants who had been in the Lon Nol civil service. I will not insist on the fact that these 49 documents, as we pointed out last year, show a unique case of written communications at local level, because we have here a long series of documents from the same place, and we can see the different links with various levels of authority. These are documents in the archives that are very important. This shows us how efficient communication means were. It talks about the control or the power exercised by district level and sector level authorities on local communities, particularly regarding the monitoring of the new people from the Khmer Republic. I would like to mention a few elements regarding indicia of reliability. Council Carnavas recalled under what circumstances those documents were found. The originals have not been found. It is true, and that is what Mr. Luk Chang said at the hearing of the 6th of February 2012 in transcript E1/39.1. He specifically described all those circumstances and the fact that the original documents were obtained from Mr. Superin, but subsequently they were not found. Copies were found where TCE 38 said he left them, that is at the Tu Sleng Museum. Now we know that TCE 38 will not testify. However, information at our disposal is sufficient given the creditworthiness of the documentation center's archives, and also in view of the prior reliability, which I'll talk about. All the 49 documents from the Tramkat district are very coherent, and they are also coherent in relation to the 51 documents that were already deemed admissible. It would not be coherent to dissociate them from one another. Regarding the form, these reports are generally handwritten, which shows that the presentation is not always very clear. The authorities, the local authorities, use the means at their disposal at the time in the communes and the security centers. As we found in the other 59 documents from Tramkak, we've seen other documents written on school notebooks, including multiplication tables. The language in these reports is typical of the Democratic Kampuchea period. Mention is often made of Angka, words like the enemy, smashing, purges, revolutionary vigilance. We also find reports addressed to comrade, brother, beloved comrade. Then we see the new people, 17th April people, contemptible, Yun, traitor, and re-education. And lastly, still with regard to indicia of reliability in these documents, many witnesses were heard by the co-investigating judges, and they authenticated some of these reports. They corroborated others, given for instance the names of local authorities at the time, the names of the different communes in District 105. Now, these names correspond to what we find in Sector 1 or District 105 reports. Witness TCW 680 can be mentioned in point in D 232/93, witness TCW 505 in two records of hearings D 232/16 and D 232/73. This witness was a former district secretary, that is District 105. One of his brothers took over from him. He gave some details regarding the administrative structure in District 106 and Sector 13. He identified the document 101830, which is in this batch of documents regarding Tamkak. We have TCW 518, we have D 323/18, and lastly, witness TCW 301, and the record is D 232/46. Now, to conclude on these 49 documents from the Tamkak archives, I would say that they are relevant because they have to do not only with the local administrative structure and the communication system at the level of the sectors, but also because they concern a number of people who were soldiers belonging to the Lon Nol regime or members of the New People. And these facts are systematically prioritized, and they should enable them to identify who was the enemy during the DK era. The reason given by Kyo Sampan's defense for her objections that these documents were not signed and they didn't bear any names is not sufficient reason for the chamber to rule that these documents are inadmissible. I believe I am done with my comments regarding these categories of documents. I do not have any further objections at this stage. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, says the President. How about the lead co-lawyers for the civil party? Do you have anything to add to what the prosecution? Counsel, Mr. President, thank you, but we do not have anything to add. The President. The time is appropriate for the adjournment, and in addition, the Chamber has a few things to deliberate among members of the bench. We will adjourn now and resume at
សូមក្រោកឈរ
3. The court is now adjourned.